Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. With the year nearly over, I wanted to take a look at some of my favorite games of the year. This was a pretty good year filled with great games, but unfortunately I didn't get a chance to play every single one that I wanted to. So there may be a few games that aren't on here, but if I missed any of your favorite games, let me know it in the comments below so I know what to check out next year. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the list of my favorite games of 2024. My first game today is the Plucky Squire. Now this was a game I've been waiting for forever, and I remember seeing the first trailer way back and immediately wanting to play it. The game takes place in a storybook and the gameplay kind of reminds me of a top-down Zelda, especially the combat. That is, until you leave the storybook, which is a big part of solving some of this game's puzzles. Outside of the storybook, it's 3D instead of top-down, so it feels like a completely different game, and it also feels more like a platformer as well. But the cool thing about this game is it isn't just 2D and 3D, you've got some sections that are like a completely different genre of game. And even though they don't last for too long, they're still pretty cool. For example, a few of the pages have side-scrolling sections that kind of feel like old-school Mario. Plus, there's some cool boss fights as well, one that plays like a Punch-Out type game and another that's like a turn-based RPG battle, which is really cool. This game just really exceeded my expectations, and I love the art style of this game, especially inside the book. It really does remind you of a picture book, and the way the story is told by flipping through the pages, it's just perfect for this type of game. And this game may look like a game for kids, but some of the puzzles can be very challenging, especially when you get to the ability to switch between pages and go back to old pages to change stuff that affects later pages. It definitely makes for some complex puzzles. You can really tell the developers put a lot of love into this game, and it definitely shows. I really hope we can get another one of these games, because I can see the Plucky Squire becoming an iconic character in the future. Next up, we have The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. This game kind of came out of nowhere. It was announced earlier this year and released a few months later, and I gotta admit, it's a nice return to the old top-down Zelda style games, especially considering we haven't had a new one in over a decade. Well, except for Link's Awakening Remake, which is also a great game. It's just nice to get something new that isn't open world like the previous Zelda games have been. Now, unlike every other Zelda game, this time you get to play as Zelda, finally. But it may be different than what people were expecting. Instead of using your sword, you use the Tri-Rod, which creates echoes you find throughout the world. This could be enemies, tools, or even a chair. Now, I personally prefer using the sword, but echoes are definitely an interesting change. But my one gripe would be the UI for them. Scrolling through echoes can take forever, especially when you get a whole bunch of them. Just trying to find 1 in 100 different echoes can be a hassle, and something I wish they would fix. Another minor complaint I have, which may just be me, is fighting enemies in this game with echoes can be pretty boring. I feel like most of the time I sit on an echo to fight an enemy while I just wait. Which brings me to my favorite thing about this game, which is being able to turn into Link. Well, at least for a short period of time. You have a little energy meter that you level up as you complete rifts, and as long as you have energy you can become Link and use his sword, and as you progress through the game you unlock his bow and bombs as well. It's definitely useful during boss fights. But I think my favorite thing about this game has to be the world itself. It's very similar to a Link of the Past world with some stuff added. One of my favorite locations is the Fair Wetlands, which is home to the Deku Scrubs. I just love Deku Scrub locations, especially the Deku Palace in Majora's Mask. But the world has plenty of new secrets and stuff to discover, which makes the exploration so fun. I also really like the art style of this game. It's very similar to Link's Awakening Remake art style, and I think it's perfect for top-down Zelda games. The music in this game is also great, which is pretty common for Zelda games. But overall, this game is just full of charm and is a unique experience for a Zelda game, which is why I had to put it on this list. My third game today is Dragon Quest III HD 2D. This was one of my most anticipated games of this year, and the wait was well worth it. This is another game in the popular HD 2D style, and I gotta admit, I've never been the biggest fan of the style because it was always lacking color, but this game finally changed it. I think it's the best looking game in this style. The world is so bright, vibrant, and full of color, and it just looks incredible. I never got a chance to play the original Dragon Quest III, so getting this remaster was great, and I'm also glad we're gonna get 1 and 2 as well in 2025. But this game is just so great though, from the music to the locations, everything about this game is great. Plus, I'm a big fan of the basic old school turn-based battles, which Dragon Quest has always done so well. In this game, you have your hero and you get a choice to recruit 3 other party members with different classes ranging from warrior to thief. You can even choose a merchant, which gives you 10% more gold after battles. But other than that, the merchant does kind of suck. Another standout in this game is the world itself. All the different locations are vastly different from each other, and you've got all types of environments. You've got lush forests, snowy and desert areas, and even a town that has a Japanese style to it, which is one of my favorites. But my biggest complaint about the game is the difficulty spike about halfway through the game. Around the time you get your ship and are free to go wherever, the battles just get way harder. It also doesn't help that you can get into battles with around 10 enemies at a time, which can be brutal. It gets to a point where normal enemies can feel stronger than actual boss fights, which is kind of annoying. Plus, this being a Dragon Quest game, you'll want to grind a lot. Luckily, I found a spot with metal slimes, which makes the grinding a bit easier, but it can still be a little frustrating at times. But all that aside, the game is definitely worth playing, especially to prepare you for Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D. Next up, we have none other than the Game of the Year, Astrobot, and I'm actually happy this game got Game of the Year. It's a great game, and seeing a 3D platformer win Game of the Year almost feels surreal nowadays. But what makes this game so great? To me, the thing that makes this game stand out the most is all the PlayStation cameos we get in it. Throughout the game, you collect Astrobots, some of which are character cameos from other games such as Ratchet, Kratos, and the Hunter from Bloodborne, and we can't forget the best PlayStation character, Knack. But seriously, there are dozens of these cameo characters to collect, which makes each level feel even more exciting to play through. Although I'm surprised there isn't any Final Fantasy characters at all, not even Cloud, which is crazy to me. But beside that, the game itself is amazing. The controls of Astrobot, as well as the platforming, and even the levels. In a way, the game heavily reminds me of Mario Galaxy, especially with the levels being planets. Each level is way different from the previous level, and I really like the levels at the end of the galaxies that are like you're playing the PlayStation game that it's from. One of them is a God of War level where you get a power-up that lets you use Kratos' axe, and another is an Uncharted level where you become Nathan Drake and get to use his gun, and it turns into a third-person shooter almost. Those levels are some of the most fun in this game, and I really hope this game shows Sony that not every game they make needs to look amazing and have a great story to be good, because as long as the game is fun, that's all that really matters. Now this next game I wasn't sure if I should add because it is an expansion, but it was some of the most fun I had this year. That being Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. Honestly, with as big as this expansion is, it could have been its own game. Now I loved Elden Ring when it came out, and this was more of that. Now I will say I prefer the more linear type Souls games over open world, but that doesn't prevent this from being a great experience. Some of the main locations you go to have great level designs, it's just getting to them can be a little boring for me. One of my favorite locations, however, being the ruins of Rao. I think that's how you say that. This place was so cool looking. For some reason it gave me Castle in the Sky vibes. Now this place was a bit confusing to get through though, but it's okay because I liked how cool it looked. Another place I liked a lot was the Bellerat Tower Settlement. Again, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but I'm trying my best. Which is one of the first locations you get to. This was probably the most fun for me to explore. Shadow of the Erdtree is just filled with cool locations, but we can't forget the best part, the bosses. Now, I will say I hated the final boss. I like challenges, but the fight was just insane. I had trouble getting to the second phase, and the second phase felt even more unfair. Plus, some of the attacks were hard to see at times. But other than that, all the rest of the bosses were great. My favorite had to be Mesmer, which is the boss on the main art for the expansion. His design is cool and his fight is challenging but still really fun. After playing through this expansion, I kinda wish I would have got the collector's edition for this game, just so I got the statue of him. But at the end of the day, while this may not be a full game, it was still a great experience, and if you're a fan of Elden Ring, you should 100% check this out if you haven't already. Next up, we have Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door Remastered. This game kinda started my channel. We played through it entirely here on the channel and I loved every minute of it. Now I played through some of it on the GameCube back in the day, but I never finished it. I think I stopped at chapter 3, and man was I missing out. Chapter 2 and 3 were decent, but everything after that was even better. I really like chapter 5 and 6, but I think 5 being my favorite where you're on the island. While I still prefer the original Paper Mario on the Nintendo 64, this game is almost just as good. The combat is so fun in these games. It has a turn-based battle system, but it's interactive so it never gets boring. And for a Mario game, the story in this game is actually pretty good. You come to Rogueport, which is a dangerous place, and search for Princess Peach, who has been kidnapped by X-Nauts, and the X-Nauts are actually really cool villains as well. I also really like the partners you get throughout this game, like Bobbery and the Yoshi, who you get to see hatch from an egg and name. I named mine Simon when we played through it here on the channel, and he was great. This game also has some really memorable bosses as well, my favorite being Hooktail the Red Dragon in Chapter 1 and Cortez from Chapter 5. Chapter 5 was just so good. I'd say my only complaint about this game, however, is that it's very linear, and I usually don't mind that, but this game is literally you just move from left to right for the most part. The original one definitely had more directions to go by, and I wish this one was more like that, but it's not too bad. But this game is just so great, and getting to play through it on my channel makes it really special for me. And if you haven't played it yet, I definitely recommend it. My last game of the day and my favorite game of 2024 is Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This game is just so good and everything about it is nearly perfect for me, but it does have some flaws. Now back when Remake came out, it was also my game of the year, and I'd say this game is twice as good as that game. It's definitely nice not being restricted to Midgard now, and seeing some of these locations like Cosmo Canyon and the Golden Saucer in this game is just so surreal. The one thing I think this game's perfect at is its characters. They're all so incredible in this game, and in Rebirth we now have Cait Sith. And we get a glimpse of Vincent and Cid, which makes me even more excited for the final part. I can't wait to play as Vincent. He is one of my favorite characters in the original. And the combat in this game is pretty much the same as it was in Remake, with a bunch of new stuff added as well as some improvements. One being the aerial combat isn't bad anymore, which is great. Plus you've also got a lot of new abilities to use as well. What makes the game even better is each character you play is completely different from one another. Cloud is pretty good all around, and Barret is pretty good if you want to stay back and use range. And you have Yuffie, who is super fun to use. And you also have Cait Sith. He's alright, but I never used him much. He still has all his slots and luck-based abilities though, which is pretty cool. And we can't forget about the soundtrack in this game. It's full of bangers, and the variety of music is honestly unmatched. The Bow Wow song has to be my favorite though. And while some people might not like where the story is heading, I think it makes the game more interesting. Looking up theories on what people think happened in the end is so entertaining. Plus, all the important stuff is still there for you to enjoy. And they even fleshed them out a whole bunch and didn't just make them places you stop by. Especially Gungaga. That whole scenario might be one of my favorites with the reactor and the weapons. One thing about this game that I'm not the biggest fan of is how many minigames there are. There is an insane amount of minigames, and I feel it would have been better to save some for part 3. But Queen's Blood is great, and one I hope to see get fleshed out more in part 3. Another thing this game does really well is its bosses. Each one feels so epic, as if they were their own final boss. Plus they all have multiple phases for the most part. And every Genova fight is incredible. I'm impressed they were able to make them all not feel the same. Honestly, I could go on about this game forever, but I'll let you guys check it out for yourself. It's definitely one worth playing, which is why it's my favorite game of the year. And there you have my favorite games of 2024. If I missed any great games from this year, let me know in the comments so I know what to check out. And if you made it this far in the video, be sure to subscribe and check out some more videos on screen. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I can't wait to see what 2025 has in store for us. So I'll see you guys in the next video.